Hey guys, I can see you starting to come in, which is great. I love that the more of these that we do, the more names I know. That makes me very happy. Feel a little less like I'm talking to the blank screen that I am talking to. A little more like I'm talking to people that I know, which I appreciate. Someday we'll be able to do some of these back in person again, and that'll be even better. But I do love that we have an online community so I can talk to people that I do to a lesser or greater extent know, which is just a much better experience than talking to a blank screen. I will get started as I'll do my welcome bit, and as people join, we'll get into introing the guys. Welcome, thanks for joining us. I think we're up to our fourth or fifth one of these that we've run online. I like that we're getting into a little bit of a rhythm with it. By special request, after this evening's session, we'll be hosting an open, calling it a pub session. That's off the back of the workshop that we ran in December. Afterwards, we had an open session where people could just chat to each other, and that was really, really popular. And people were saying they'd like to do that every month. So after our meetup, we'll have that opportunity, and hopefully you enjoy that as well as the rest of the evening. So while we're here, why do we bother to do these things? From my perspective, my name's Kerrin, if you haven't met me already. I work for Betfair. My role at the company is to try and increase engagement with automation and our API offering. And for me, the key part of that is to try and make it easier to automate, to use our API, to use our data. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to work with other people who've already done what you're looking to do. And that's where community comes in. There are an amazing number of people here who have great experiences and a breadth of experience that I obviously don't have, no individual could have. But the community is wonderfully open to sharing those experiences and that knowledge. Both the guys who are going to talk tonight, but also more generally, like in the pub session afterwards. So our motivation is simply to make it easier to talk to other people and to hear other people's stories. So that's why we're here. This evening we've got Evo and Nicholas joining us. I'm very grateful to both of them. They've both got strong backgrounds in tennis modelling and then automating their activity on tennis through the exchange. We're focusing on tennis this month, partly because we've, the Oz Open's coming up, which is the first bit of that sort of sport that we've had in Australia for a while. But also as part of that, we're running an Australian Open-centric Datathon, which you guys are obviously all welcome to join and contribute to if you want to. It's got a $10,000 prize pool, so some fair chunk of change there to win if you're keen. We're providing a decent data set to let you model. That'll be, submissions will be due on the 8th of Feb, which is when the Oz Open is kicking off after a little bit of a delayed start, all things being equal. Ash, I'll get you to drop a link to the Rego site in the chat box. So if you want to, you can jump across and register for that. And that'll be a little bit of a theme this evening in the conversations that we have. Couple of other community bits. If you're not on there already, I do recommend joining the Betfair Quants Slack channel. Again, I'll get Ash to share an invite to that. Ash and Ben are my awesome team members. I'm very, very lucky to have them. They make my life significantly easier and let us do lots of cool stuff. So Ash, if you can share an invitation to the Slack channel for anyone who wants to join. It's a community channel. It's not run by us. I'm just there as a participant along with everyone else. But it's a great way to connect with other people and to see how other people are tackling the problems that we're all trying to solve. There is also a couple of relevant channels, particularly on Slack. So there's a meetups one, which is where, at least in theory, chatter about tonight should be happening. But also there's a Datathon one, which is a good place to talk about what you're doing in terms of your model, and there's already conversation going on there, which is really cool. One other thing I will ask for is I'm still looking for contributions to our awesome list on our Betfair Down Under GitHub. And again, Ash, I'll hit you up again. If you can send a link to the Down Under GitHub, we've got an awesome list there. It's got some a good range of repos that are available for working with our API offerings and our historic data offerings. And I am really keen to make that even more complete. So if there are things that you use that aren't on there, please feel free to send them through. If you've got a repo you use yourself that you're happy to open source, even better. Particularly really keen at the moment for repos that are using the historic JSON data. So if you have any of that, please share it across. Really keen to grow the resources that are available within the community. All right, so that's me. I'm going to ask Ben to turn on Evo's camera if you can, so we can swap across. So guys, down the bottom, there's a Q&A button. If you haven't already clicked it, you can. Through the session, if you've got questions that you want to ask, don't feel that you have to wait till the end. Feel free to drop them there so that if you don't forget it and chuck them in as you go. Also, as we said, you can chat through Slack during if you want to. I don't necessarily guarantee that I'll see it, but at least you can chat with other people. Evo, hi. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Hi, thank you for asking me to join you.
No, very happy to have you here. You're very, very appropriate person to be talking, particularly on 10S modeling and automation, given your background.
Right.
Could you give a little bit of an intro to you? What was your life like pre-Betfair? How did you come to where we are, and what's your background like?
Okay. Yeah. So I have a software development background. Software in mostly systems engineering and some website development as well. And so Betfair, my adventures with Betfair started with just like a part-time, thinking, this could be a really good way of making some money, or I think that let's look into this. And then in my free time, I would just do that outside of office hours when I was working full-time as a software developer. And that was really good. It's very slow progress when you're doing it in that way, though. So, but yeah, I don't really have a lot of other punting or betting experience. It's mostly software development, and where I was working as well, I had a lot of data scientists that are working alongside me, so I could see what they were doing and I could pick their brains for ideas for things like that. And it's funny because most of them had their own little side projects, whether it was footy betting or stock market modeling, and yeah, that was good. That was sort of my ramp into it. And then at some point, I think about after 2 years, I decided, look, it's not moving fast enough. So if I'm going to commit to it, if I'm going to do it, I need to commit fully, because otherwise I'll never bring it to fruition or make those leaps that I need to do. So I sort of just took a leap into going full time, and it's been an adventure. Definitely.
How long have you done it more seriously? How long ago?
It's been about 3 years now. Yeah, so
it goes fast, right?
It's amazing. I mean, there's lots of ups and downs there. Obviously, I think
always in this journey, there are very few people who have a purely like nice, clean, linear line. Very, very few, and most of them aren't very. The volume isn't there. So, can I ask, ballpark, once you quit to do it full time, how long did you spend working on this until you felt comfortable that sort of returns you were getting were worth making that commitment and feeling comfortable I mean, obviously in this world, you never feel 100% comfortable because you know that things can change, but ballpark, when did
Yeah,
you sort of
yeah.
start feeling that this was the right call?
So I think, the thing that appealed to me, the thing that appealed to me from doing it full time is the potential earnings, and that those can outscale any working job. So I was sort of in a position where I'd been working, say, maybe 2 years on it, or and I also have a partner that I'm working with actually too. So that, and they have different experience backgrounds. So we sort of all bring something to the table. And one of the partners was willing to bring funding to the table as well. So that was that wasn't so much. It was just security, So it's sort of a risk for me to do it full time, but in the case that things go really badly, I knew that there was some safety net there. So that helped me to make the decision. And we just, I sort of went, let me go for the high yielding approach versus, trying to go for a pretty, I mean, it's also what I'm excited about, So obviously I was more excited about this than doing the job the full-time job I was doing. So it's like, let me just do it. And then it was just that I had a security if I needed it, which was the sort of tick over factor to like, okay, let me go do it full time. And let's try it. If you're gonna go big or go home is probably a good way of putting it, but maybe not in the betting situation. So yeah.
With that, do you think it helped you to stick with it because you did have some people you were working with and you weren't going it all alone? I don't just mean financially, like that's one element, but like the mental side of it. I know a lot of people get to that point of they're sort of struggling to, make it work themselves, and to, stick out the tricky bits to get to the bits that, then that fruition. Do you think that helped?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I think having someone to bounce your ideas off is, really invaluable, and also just the support. Like, you might not all feel like despairful at the same time, or you might just have a really horrible run, and
you can carry each other a little
and
bit.
then someone will say, well, look, this is bad, but it's, hope is not lost. And then when they lose hope, you're like, oh, it's bad, but that's really great. And I think if I was just doing it alone, I would probably be a lot more cautious as well. And I think that's sort of just my tendency. So I have to work. That's an interesting, it's nice that I have partners because we get the dynamic of, someone is more cautious and someone is less cautious. So you sort of wade that line, versus if it's just you and you're overly cautious, you might never stake enough to get anywhere. Or if you're on the other hand, if you're completely
laissez-faire,
then you can just
up our bank.
lose all your bankroll really quickly or something like that. So,
which are you? Do you have a higher risk tolerance or lower?
I tend to be more cautious.
Devs tend to be.
Yeah.
That's not unique to you.
Yeah, I'm always like, one of my partners will be like, oh, let's put the stake up, like let's double it. And I'm like, no, let's go 10%, or like it's so, but it's good we have that balance,
It's been interesting watching. What are we up to? Nearly a year of the Slack community as it's developed. I think something that a lot of people find there who aren't in a position where they have people they get to work with. There's a channel on their daily results, and I think quite a lot of people are finding their version of that ability to share with other people and share the lows and share the highs, because a lot of the time in our world, we don't get to share the successes because it is a little hard to talk about and go, hey, I had a really good run. And actually it's, the downs are getting better and now it's actually, trending the right way. That kind of then asks people to go, oh, it was going down? That's part of the wagering world.
Yeah, if you share that to someone just randomly, they'll be like, oh, you just got lucky or you're losing your mind.
Yeah, and they don't necessarily get it. Yeah, I think
exactly. They don't
there's a lot of value to that.
Yeah.
High level, obviously as high or less as you're comfortable with, can you share a little bit of what sort of model you've built and what sort of strategy you run? Obviously primarily tennis, but is it sort of market level or is it individual, like are you creating a rating and then betting on that? What sort of approach are you taking?
Yeah, so what we do is tennis is sort of focused mainly on tennis, and I think probably I'm assuming this is quite general and in a way, because obviously we have a data set and then we build a strategy that we're going to focus on, and then we'll back test it. And I think that's quite standard, but I'm obviously not that sure. Like I haven't spoken to too many people doing this kind of way. So yeah, and it's really quite tricky, I think, because we've evolved through many strategies as well. Like we've come from some really over years we've had. One strategy was quite successful for almost an entire year, but we were very low stakes back then.
Always the way.
I was like, okay, and then so I guess high level, we're focusing on mainly match odds. So. We've peeked into some other markets as well, like the second game, but all the volume is on match odds. So I think, and they're all very connected as well. So
what happens in one tends to reflect what's happening.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you really feel like going fast paced, you can go for the games or something like that.
You're not likely to get on for a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be. Yeah, not huge volumes, right? So, and in general terms, tennis as well, we're focused on like the main ATP tour. So that's sort of our niche on a high level. And I think our experience has been that the men's games are easier for us to get strategies that work quite well.
So, I wonder how much of that is that the volume's there too still, primarily.
Yes, yeah, I mean, there's more volume there, right, as well. And
and a little more reliable, generally, is that what I've heard?
It's also, I think it's a part mainly because the men's serves are much more dominating. So if you have a really good serve, you're going to be more predictable in a way. Whereas if the serve's not as dominating, it's a bit less predictable. Well, I don't know if that's true for why the women's is less like that, but that's so those are high level.
Do you revisit the women's tournaments with any regularity?
Yeah, actually we have been in the last year. We've gone really looking into like opening up all the. So initially we focused a lot on getting all the data really good. So I mean that's standard.
Easier said than done.
And but for the women's, we focused on the men's for that. So the last year or so, we've focused on getting some of the women's data to good quality, so we can actually backtest it quite well. And we do test things on there as well. And I think there's some. I think there's also maybe some missed opportunity there in general, because people tend to go to the memes. So maybe there might be a little bit of a game there somewhere to go for.
I just think it's one of those where it's easy to sort of dismiss things once and then not revisit them. And I see that quite a lot. Jono, who we've had as a previous guest, he talks about it when he talks about sort of greyhound markets, how he sort of dismissed those for a long time, and then he came back to them after years, and he's like, oh, actually these are very different than they were before. And the same way that strategies evolve, so do markets.
I think that's definitely something really important to know, is that the past behavior is not
not indicative of.
It's not going to be future, and the markets actually change quite dramatically sometimes, and it can bite you sometimes.
I was going to ask, have you? So we've already seen some chatter in the sort of the Slack channel talking about like COVID and the impact of COVID on particularly on tennis is the relevant topic. Have you found that over the last 11 months that's changed how the markets work, and have you had to refactor things to take that into account? Obviously there was a gap there for a while when nothing was being played. It's always fun.
Yeah. I mean, when the tennis started up again, I guess I can't say on any real objective sort of perspective that I think it was different. But when I'd be looking at markets, looking at matches, I felt like there were some differences, but I think it could be also the players that were playing differently with no spectators. It's quite a different game, and some players that struggle with spectators were having a better time. So that's I think the markets did change a little bit, but not in a dramatic way that I can definitively say that they've gone beyond recognition, kind of.
If you were looking at the Oz Open, which I know you are to a lesser or greater extent, if you were looking at that, there's some sort of chatter that there is likely to be potentially a fairly significant home ground advantage, because obviously the Aussie players aren't in quarantine the same way that the international players are. Is that something that you would manually or what's what I'm looking for? I don't think modelistically is a word. But either way, is that something you're factoring in? You could add a
bias, you could add a bias in there to make an Australian player or a local player slightly more likely. But I found that a lot of the time, because we focus on ATP, the main tour, and also Grand Slams, the people playing in there are very predictable or very consistent. So it's tough. I think there's some, especially for the ones in hard quarantine where they're just in their hotels and
bashing a ball against the wall.
Exactly. Training but maybe that gives them an advantage. That might be they've got nothing else to do, and they're just
not going to get distracted,
practicing, watching old games. Maybe they, it's that I'm not so sure that it's going to have such a big difference. Especially, it can also depend on each person. Someone could have a horribly depressing time.
It'll get in their head if not in their body.
Yeah, it can be. It's hard to stay in a hotel room isolated for 14 or however long they're going to stay. But
those of us who've been in Melbourne, like you and me, we feel that, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's tough, and so I think there's maybe a chance that maybe a chance that they're going to do worse, and maybe the heat. Although I don't know what the heat's going to be like this time. The weather lately in Melbourne has been crazy.
Yeah, insane, right?
So yeah, a lot of the time, I think some players are disadvantaged already because they're coming from a very different climate, and the Australian Open, you're playing in. It can be grueling to play a five match in 35,
36,
40 degree.
38, yeah.
It's so. I think I just trust the numbers most of the time. I mean, that's sort of my approach. I think there might be some approach there, but I don't think I'm going to go for that.
Be interesting to see how it plays.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to jump across to Nicholas, and we'll swap back in a minute. You get a break. Thanks, Evo.
Yeah, thanks.
And I'll lean on Ben to swap over the cameras. Awesome. Thank you very much. Excellent. So where Evo comes from quite a strong comp sci dev background. Nick, hi. Thanks for joining us. You have more of a modelling background, don't you? What's your history pre-Betfair? How long have you been around? What's your story?
Well, I'm an engineer designing electronics, and I still do it as my day job, and I'm quite happy through the ups and downs of betting to still have that to lean on. I don't know, I probably joined Betfair, I think I was definitely in 2005. I don't know whether I was in a year or so before that.
Started back a while now.
On Aussie runs.
Goes back a while now.
Yeah, started off betting on Aussie runs. Yeah. And sort of plodded along for 5 or 6 years thinking, I've got it. And then the next year was bad, and I'd go up and yo-yo up and down. And then I think it was about 2009, I got some data for some back data for tennis, and focused on trying to model that and improved my, the way I did the modelling. And then I guess from 2010 to 2013, that was going crazy for me, and I was thinking, hey, a moment, I might be going pro very soon. But that kind of dried up. From 2014 to 2015, I was basically making 0% profit on turnover, and with all the effort of doing this outside work, I'll give tennis a break. But I guess over the years, I mentioned AFL, but I've with basically the same approach, modelled various sports.
NBL is one of yours, isn't it?
MLB.
Min bet laws, sorry.
Yeah, I've tried NFL, I've tried golf, various things, but probably only ones that really worked well for me are Aussie rules, tennis, and I had a good year of MLB, but I've kind of dropped that again. So anyway, after 2015, when I said I'll give tennis a break, and I guess the reason for that was I was only using game data. I didn't have points data, and I think the market had, moved, got smarter and moved on.
Beyond that.
And I didn't have a good, I couldn't find a good free source for points data at that time. So, I was in the back of my mind, I could come back and have another look. So I guess in late 2018, I found a data source I was happy to use. And that just kind of coincided with the Datathon you ran the Oz Open the next year.
2019 one, yep.
So I was...
So you came second, right?
Yeah, placed. I think I got a bit lucky. But,
there's always some luck, right?
Yeah, so... yeah, of course. Well, in a short term, just in one tournament, there's luck. You can win or you can lose. Yeah. But my aim is to model the probability of every match over a course of a whole season. So there's 2,500 ATP matches, and probably a similar number of women's matches. And I want to model that probability of each match, and then see where I've got an edge.
And are you doing both men's and women's now? Because I know it was partly your women's your women's model did really well that year in the Datathon. That was the one that actually did better, which you were surprised by at the time, I remember.
Well, Yes. I mean, I've got the same model for both, but the variables are all
Fell your way.
weighted differently. But yeah, I've got the same algorithm that I run through for both of them. Yes, I'm doing both ATP and WTA. I'm even sort of dabbling in Challenger this year, so I'll see how that goes. So yeah, although the volume is a little bit lower on that.
Yeah, I think that can be
so
a bit hard to
betting will be
balance.
less as well. Yeah.
Do you have some sort of min requirements of volume to want to play, or are you just happy to play in any?
Look, I'll play. It's less than $100 volume. I'm really not interested. I want to play for something more than that. Yeah, I guess that's it depends on the bank size, but at the moment I've got a bit of a bigger bank than I'm playing with, and $50 bets it's too much effort to be bothered.
Yeah, it's not.
I know
really
I might make money out of it, but I'm not fully automated. So if I was fully automated, I'd obviously be happy to take those things on. But I'm manually placing bets, and I can't be bothered.
No, I completely get that. And you and me, goal automation.
Yeah, that's right.
In terms of something, I'm interested with you because we've talked a lot before, and like you talk about the variance that you've seen over the years, and that you've seen some pretty extreme variation over that time. From your perspective, how long are you happy to let something play and consider it natural variation before you go, something's changed and I need to change in response?
Yeah.
Is that like a number of games? Is it a time period?
I kind of want to, over the years, I've sort of got different thoughts on that, but kind of at the moment, I'm looking at, I've got back testing data for basically 4 full seasons, and I'll go back and have a look at what's my biggest drawdown on that, and how many times have I had such and such a drawdown, and I'll always look at my current losing streak and say, is that comparable, or has it suddenly got worse? And I've also, other than just the pure profit side of it, I've now kind of come up with a plan to test my model on other criteria. So if you might be betting only 1 in 10 game matches or something, I want to see that my model's still performing reasonably well against closing odds or the odds at the time I bet. I usually try and get on as soon as there's enough volume there. And I want to try and compare how my whole model for all the matches is against, say, those bookie odds at that time. So for that,
and so sort of comparing, and I like that you look at multiple metrics there.
Well, log loss is one of my favourite metrics. So I'm, like
perfect.
You're a Datathon, I will be using log loss versus, am I close to what the bookie's log loss is? And I know that if I'm close enough, I'll make money. If I'm too far away, then there's trouble. So I pulled the pin on ATP after about a month last year because I was just not seeing good
value
metrics on that. Subsequently found out why, but it took me to the end of the year to work out what my problem was. But nevertheless, that was not.
At least you found out.
I hadn't lost a lot of money. Yeah, I hadn't lost a lot of money, but it didn't feel right. So I had to sort of, okay, I'll just sit and watch for a while, and then come back to it. So it's not just the profit and loss that I'm looking at now.
I think that's very sensible. And your model is a pretty you're very player centric, aren't you? That you create a rated price for that player and then bet overs or unders depending on how you play.
Yeah, that's right. I rate a price for each match, and then I'll take a particular overlay, and above that I'll have it go. Otherwise, I'll just let it ride.
Can we ask what that?
And I'm
overlay is?
always only betting Sure. I think this year I'm going to go with about a 20% overlay.
And is that on either side, or do you take your favourite?
I'll take either side, but a 20% overlay, not many favourites are going to meet that.
Yep.
And I'll only do head-to-head matches, before and no in play.
Yep. And yeah, so only the head-to-head, not the game.
Nothing fancy.
Right?
I used to do sets as well, but the volume my volume went beyond what was worthwhile for me to be bothered.
Like Evo was saying, yeah, similar sort of thing. Question coming through. What's your fave metric? The question was from AB. So his suggestion was love lost. Do you have a metric that you're particularly keen on?
I like to use log loss. That's my favourite metric. And I'll
log loss. I see what you're saying.
Log loss, yeah. Isn't that what you use on the Datathon?
I thought that it was. No, you're right. I misunderstood the question. I thought he was asking about, love as a feature. But you understood the question and I didn't. Yes, log loss. Misha asks, what about Briar when you're working for head-to-head markets?
Briar?
B-R-I-E-R.
Is in what?
I'm not.
I don't really know what that is. Sorry, I'm self-trained. I'm not.
Sorry, Briar score, he says. If it's not one you use, it's not one you use.
It's not one, no.
Cool, that's an answer in and of itself. Like I was saying to Evo earlier, do you have opinions on the Oz Open and how, obviously we've got hearing a lot of the news about the quarantine issues, how that might change what your model might look like?
I'm not going to change my model. Last year, Evo said he saw there might have been some differences when it started up again. I didn't see anything particularly. And look, by the time the Oz Open starts, they should have all been out for a week and been running around anyway. I think I like to go with the data, like the analysis, rather than tweaking it too much. I think there might be something there, but it's more, from my point of view, I think it's more likely that it's going to be in the noise.
I like that answer. I like that both of you are trusting your models. As you say, trust the numbers. That's what they're there for, right?
Yeah, I've not trusted my numbers so many times in the past, and had big dogs come in, and I should have been on that, but I sort of even I was at the US Open last year. I had a bet, and I think it was a big bet in the fourth round. It said, "Don't go." And I think it was Belinda Bencic. Anyway, I said, "What's going on here? Odds are way too high." And one of my mates said, "Oh, she left the court in a wheelchair last match." I thought, "Oh, okay, I'll give it a miss." So anyway, she came out and won. I don't know if it was her. It was one of them anyway. One of the girls.
That's where automation, like so many people say this, that their head gets in the way. That, if you trust your numbers, trust your numbers. That's where being able to automate it and go hands off really helps.
Your back testing should show. It should, include all the problems that are going to happen, and people throwing matches. They're included in there, and you just take that as a loss.
On what we were talking about with Evo earlier, you're fairly sort of independent in what you do, aren't you? You don't have a lot of people you get to work with. Is that fair? That's my memory.
Yeah, no, my betting, I'm just doing it by myself. It's a hobby that I have.
And how do you
bounce ideas off other people? I haven't been trained.
How do you play that? Like, does that give you, are there times when that's challenging? How do you sort of get through those harder times when you don't have the opportunity to bounce off someone else?
Well, I'm always questioning myself and my models, and I guess as we all are. But look, I've still got my job, so I can take a break, and everything's still fine. Take some time to evaluate it. I've always kind of, since I've started betting, I've put in a couple of $1,000, and I think after about 2 months, I took that money out straight because I had a good start, and I've never actually put any money in again. It's always
That's a
been
good
going the
feeling.
other way. So I feel that I'm not, I'm betting on the profit. So if I get more profit, that's great. If I lose some of it,
still the profit you're losing.
that's disappointing, but I'll pull out fairly quickly if I think things aren't right.
I think that helps with that sort of that mental game. If you're always trending the right way, at least.
Yeah, and I've dropped a model too. As I said, I dropped tennis for 4 years or something. I dropped AFL and for a while before I got better data on that as well. And I'm quite happy to drop it and sit out. I don't miss the potential wins if I don't do it for a year. Yep. But I'll sweat it when I'm playing it, obviously.
You're happy to play the long game.
Yeah.
Nice. I'm going to swap back across to Evo because I'm keeping an eye on the time. And it's way too easy to talk to you guys. Then if we can swap back, and Nick, I'll come back in a sec. Give me a few minutes. So, Evo, I'm going to ask you, I want to hear some of your core learnings from, you said you've been doing this for, let's say, 5 years, give or take. What are some things you wish you'd known 5 years ago? What would you wish you'd been able to tell yourself if you could go back in time? What would you say to someone who's new and maybe early on and going, hey, do I want to take this seriously? Like, what advice would you give?
Yeah, yeah. So that's I've thought a bit about this, and my my instinct answer is a very, very cliched answer. Which I've I don't want to go to that. So I'll say that as a supplementary, and then I'll say something else as well. Because I think my first answer would be make sure you have good data.
But it's a cliche for a reason.
Yeah, it is totally a cliche for a reason. And the thing is, I actually got told that as well a lot at the beginning. So I knew it was very vital.
But
a
bit like parenting, right? Until you're there, you don't know it.
Yeah, and it's also it's easy to believe that you'll get good data and then that's it. Whereas the reality for me has been more like I've gotten, we started off, I got some good data, but then we're going for a different angle, so I need different kind of data. Or sorry, yeah. So I feel like our data quality is quite high, but it's also evolving. So and the way that we shape it as well can change, and sometimes we have to change it's a continuous battle, I feel like, with data.
Have you got any sort of pointers you're happy to give out about how you go about finding good data and how you clean it when you find it, how you match it? I mean, obviously, especially with tennis, like those names, they're just... poor old Ash, huge kudos to Ash. He's the one who cleaned all the form data. And he had a go at the price data, and he's not happy with the price data. He ended up sharing the data's great, but he's not happy with the naming conventions that are used.
I
think
we just need to make
some kudos.
We just need to make an ID for every player that everyone's agreeing
global. You no longer have a name.
You don't have a name anymore. You've got
Rachachachavov or whatever.
Yeah, and depending on your data sources, the naming can be quite different as well, which is really painful. I think a lot of tennis, a lot of my pain and frustration has been with, matching like score data with market data. But I got there. It's a battle, and I think there's some. I think the thing for that is you can. There's some ways that people use names that I never realized, like Spanish names, or sometimes they'll put their
the
middle name first,
umlauts
or
and
the the diacritics, or those are painful, but you can get rid of them. But then sometimes like a D with a line is a DJ, or is it a J, or is it a
and like you said, the order as well, like
yeah.
And we can't even be consistent with it, and don't get me started on that.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of whether you have initial and then last name, or whether
I just end up having a lot of checks, permutations of like, is it this way? Is it this format, or is it this format, or is it this format, or is it this? I sort of
and
just brute force
it. So you've automated all of that to go through programmatically. You don't clean manually.
No, it just matches the player. It finds the player irrespective of the format, pretty much. So, you know, if you give me, sometimes it doesn't. And one of the techniques I've actually used, which might be helpful, is to make an alias. So I've got quite structured data. And for example, tournaments, I have like a tournament data table, for example, and I'll have a name, but I also have a one-to-many of tournament names, which are just aliases. So for a lot of my models, I just have aliases. And if I get to the point where I manually do have to merge or combine them, I do it once and it adds it to the list of aliases, and then all my lookups happen on them. I just don't want to go too far into engineering.
No. This is the stuff that's really,
yeah. So, I mean, that's a pretty good technique. And sometimes as well, like I didn't realize that sometimes, every now and then a tournament name will change because the sponsor will change, or it's also
known as
different sources will name it different tournaments, right? So sometimes people refer to it as the sponsored one, and then sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's the location. So so I think a bit more of a less cliched answer to the question would be make sure that you don't get too attached to your ideas. Like if you have a specific strategy, you think this is going to work, at some point that might not work anymore. And
don't force it.
I've and I think we've been burnt a bit like that, where we're like, oh yeah, this is working, we're going to go, and then when it stops working, there's a point. I mean, it's a battle, like a lot of things are with bidding. The nature of it is that once you decide, oh, this is not working anymore, and then suddenly it could just start working again, and then you're going, oh, I should have stayed on it. So you don't want to flip-flop, but you do need to be open to the possibility that
change.
That you don't necessarily, like, things can change. Exactly. Yeah.
That ties in really neatly with the question I asked Nick, which is something I talk about a lot, because I don't think there's any one answer. It's something everyone struggles with, which is when you're looking at variance, and you're reviewing your models and how things are or aren't trending. For you, when do you go from accepting variance to deciding that actually something has fundamentally changed and you need to change your strategy? Is that time-based? Is that money? Is that drawdown-based? Is that number of matches? Like, how do you have some sort of system, routine, parameters? What's your approach there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think my main approach, with one of our best performing strategies, we had this about, I think, late 2018. In late 2018, we did really well. 2019 Australian Open performed really well, and the thing with what we were doing is, the previous years we were just sort of flat, like really gradually increasing our bet sizes. But with this, it was going well, so we'd keep stepping, and we stepped up quite significantly. And the problem with that is that you, when things go wrong, your drawdown can be like huge, like in terms of bets, because your all those previous, if we look at them as units, right, all those units, if I was just making each bet the same weight or the same amount, then it's much easier to say, oh, like here's the drawdown, and it's sort of, I can see something's wrong, but it might go back up. But if your volume's increased and you're looking at just one loss, then it looks like, you know, it's very exponential, and then it just goes also back down exponentially. Whereas, and we got burned pretty badly like that. So the US Open in 2019 was horrible. It was really bad. And the thing is, you can have runs with, you know, we've had runs for like entire tournaments where we would lose every bet. Like I've had a run, but I mean, that also depends on how many bets you're making. So at that stage, we're making, you know, maybe two bets per match, or between, I think, an average of 2 bets per match. So to get that for a whole tournament's not wildly, I mean, it's still painful.
Yeah. Not unheard of statistically.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I think looking at drawdowns is really helpful. And if you have a long-standing strategy, you can also, you know, reference and compare to say, how's this based on previous drawdowns? How is this one? And there's a little bit of intuition, I think, and you might. What we do is, so after that we sort of got burned a bit, but we keep a tight eye on it, and we look for sort of like those red flags, you know. So if it's a tournament, or for example, some tournaments we perform quite well, score on average versus other tournaments. So if we're doing really well, badly for this tournament, that's
you're normally good on.
Yeah, exactly. So you know, or especially when there's changes, you know, if I'm seeing a pretty strong drawdown and I go, oh wait, did they change the surface? Did they change any rules?
Is the weather different?
And it's so that's sort of our approach, is just to try and keep an eye on it, or like keep your finger on the pulse. But it's hard because I don't think there's really a correct way of doing it. It's just sort of what can work for you. And I think you sort of, in the end, you have to look at everything as well. And also always, you know, respect your bankroll. So, you know, if our bankroll can't handle at some point where we only bet a certain portion of our bankroll. So if the bankroll goes down, we have to reduce our bet sizes whether we think it's not working or not, either way. That's also something quite important, I think, that maybe some newbies would be.
Bankroll management is obviously really, is that a variation of Kelly that you use?
Yeah, it's based off the Kelly's one, and it's it's just some basically proportion based, you know, because you've got some variation going on, so you have to be able to account for that and ride through the fluctuation.
I think something that sort of ties into what you're saying, that I've heard a lot of people sort of grapple with, is the mental risk tolerance. And you said, you know, you're fairly risk averse. You know, it's all well and good to talk in units and then scale your units up, but in terms of knowing yourself and knowing that variance is real, you know, sort of making sure that you're betting within a unit size where you can mentally tolerate the downs, not just financially. You know, if you can't cope, you know, you may be fine to see 10 units, but if each unit is $1,000 and you can't cope with seeing 10,000 down, and you're going to turn it off at the down, you know, sort of coping with that. I think, you know, the more I talk in this space, the more I learn that the mental game is just as hard as the actual betting game.
Yeah, especially when it's especially if you are very connected to the bankroll. So
Yes.
if you are the
It's your money.
bankroll, then
It hurts.
Then one psychological thing I think for that is I guess maybe Nick, something that he said before was like, well, he made some profit and he pulled out the money that he put in. So for him, psychologically, I think it's a bit, if you happen to start off on and up, the psychology of it's a bit easier, but it's still painful and actually really adrenalizing and traumatizing. And sometimes you have to keep a clear head. It's really hard to keep a clear head sometimes especially if you're watching the game and it's very painful to watch games when you have money based on it. Yeah.
Totally. Have you read any of the Mental Game of Poker, Jared Tendler stuff?
No, I haven't. No.
Strong recommendation too. I was talking to Paul Smith. He did one of our meetups a few months ago, and we talked about this. And I mentioned that was something that sort of other pros had recommended, and he went away and read it, and he said that it really helped him. And it talks about that mental game, and it gives some very practical strategies for dealing with it. And part of Paul's take was that it's not particularly useful if you're starting, but if you're a pro and this is what you do, it can help you to play that mental game better and to particularly deal with sort of that variance and to know how you're writing it, and is it you putting your head over the numbers like Nick was saying, that you got to sort of separate yourself out from that. Tendler, The Mental Game of Poker, it's a really interesting book. He actually comes from a golfing background, but it's a very useful.
Yeah, I've read one, Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. And it was really pleasant to read as well. It wasn't, it was very valuable. A lot of that. I will
find that one.
I tend to, I've got quite a bit of betting knowledge in a way. And so, I really try and focus, our group tries to focus on EV. So you might lose this, but if you've got EV on a bet, you've got to take it. If you've got an edge, you've got to take it and look at focus on the long game.
Yeah, which is sort of what Nick was saying as well. Sort of, I think that's because you're fully automated, aren't you? You've built it all yourself.
We're supervised, it's all. It's
supervised robot.
It's automated, but it's still human spectated.
I like that.
So we still watch the matches because I think there's some things you just can't predict or be aware of, and also it gives you insight as well into the behavior, and it helps us to develop our strategies. So if I'm looking at a match, we might see. And something I don't have, say, automated at the moment is medical timeouts and injuries. So we just try and avoid those. If someone's injured, we just don't play the game, because I think there's just it's an extra liability that we don't want. So we're dabbling with automate. We're partially as well. We've got some strategies that are running fully automated that'll just run automated bets.
Yep.
But the bigger volume ones, we will supervise.
Let's check.
Actually, someone sort of approves it.
Tick box.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where some of my engineering stuff comes in. We've got, a web-based system that we just interact with, and it's come a long way. It's probably a lot of the work's gone into that
over the years.
But that's sort of also where my strong suit is. So
that does help.
Been fun,
Nice.
So I don't know.
To make sure that we get some Q&A time, I'm going to jump back to Nick though. totally capable of talking all night. So I'll give you a break.
Okay.
Thank you. And I'm not ignoring your questions, Wolfgang. They're here. I'm just going to talk to Nick and then we'll jump across to some Q&A. So yeah, guys, if you've got Q&A questions coming through, please chuck them in. Nick, what about you? So obviously you've been doing this for quite a while. If you could go back a decade, what would your advice be? Would it be, would you give similar tips to Evo? Would it be about managing your bank? Would it be about the data sources? What would your big takeaways be?
Both of those things are very important, and I put a lot of value in those things. But I guess another thing that I don't think you mentioned yet is that for me, when my model's been going well, and I found this when tennis went off the boil, I started looking at the betting data I had and started kind of mining it for something that looked good. So I'd say, looks like I'm trying to double guess, and I'd say I've only bet on favourites and both players have played 5 matches in the last 30 days and obviously got some form there, recent form. Maybe that will work. And suddenly I've found what I think is an edge in my backtesting data. But in reality, I've probably cut down the number of bets to 150 or 200 bets, and I'm just mining some variance in there. And so I'm kind of really careful about saying, trying to find an edge by cutting down my samples, the sample bet size.
Not over-engineering things too much. Or overfishing, I guess.
And it's what the bookmakers ads try to tell you as well. Like, the last 5 matches, this team has lost the second half or something. It's like, well, so what? They want you to see
it's not relevant.
That's right. And if you can do the same thing when when you've got your model and you think it's okay, and you think, okay, I've got an edge in this particular corner of space. You got to then ask yourself, is that just variance that you've pulled out of your old data?
Yeah. No, I think that's a very real one, and one that we talk about. I see people talk about on Slack quite a lot is how easy it is to overfit, particularly like Evo said, when you like.
Yeah.
And then you get that physical attachment or emotional attachment.
So yeah, that's just one thing I wanted to add. But I guess the other things that I've learned, I probably already mentioned a bit earlier. And you're also mentioning it with Evo, the mental side of it. Do
you have any advice for that? What's your approach?
Well, if I feel like I'm getting too emotional about watching a game, I have to walk away. I've had a losing bet, and then if I start, I guess coming from another point of view, I start getting a little bit short, or I can tell that my emotions are affecting the people around me, and it's come from how well my betting's going. Then that's a real red flag. I've got to
step back a bit.
Step back and take a break, because if it's starting to affect other people around me, not that that I think it's really has, but I've got to be
keep that
aware
filter.
that I've got to be aware that this is a choice. I don't have to bet.
So it's a good self-awareness. What's your approach to bank management? So Evo says that he's a variation of Kelly. Are you more flat staking, or are you Kelly as well?
No, I use Kelly. No, I use Kelly. And I kind of use it such that my average bet size is about 1% or maybe a bit less.
And is that partly because of your sort of risk tolerance? Like we said, that mental, how far down you can go?
It's changed. When I didn't have a when I had a smaller bankroll, I would be going, 5% was quite acceptable as a bet. Now, I'm not that confident. I'm not, I know the downsides. It can be, I can easily lose 50% of my bank in 2 weeks, and what am I going to do then?
It's funny,
I'm not happy with that situation.
You hear people talk about like the percentage just being a percentage. When you're talking about units, that 10 units is 10 units is 10 units. But then from basically everyone who's sort of, like you, been at the more sort of professional end, they find that actually it's really hard to separate yourself from the money, and that 10 units when a unit is $100 is very different to 10 units when a unit is $1,000, is $2,000. But at the end of the day, it is money, and it's hard to, abstract it away. Is that fair?
And it comes back to, you've got to really trust your model a lot more if you're prepared to lose, that amount of money. So, stepping back in to betting again after not using a model for a while is like that. Okay, how am I going to go with this? Is my back testing data really good? I've got to step back and start a bit lower in terms of my percentage of bankroll, and get some confidence, runs on the board before I can. And then naturally, if you do get those runs on the board, as a percentage of your percentage doesn't change, but your bankroll changes, and you're starting to bet more.
Yep. In terms of data, you said exactly the same as Eva, that obviously it's really important to get your data right. Do you have any tips, advice for sourcing good data, cleaning good data?
So when I got back in, I found a person on GitHub who had data with points and stuff that I was interested in. I thought I'll go back and I'll just get all that stuff out of there. And now I mostly scrape and use scripts to pull the data out of ATP and WTA websites.
And how do you go about that sort of that matching pain that Eva was talking about? Are you similarly sort of brute forcing through things, or are you a bit more manual? What's your sort of approach?
I'm more manual on that. So yeah, I'll manually pull all the names for a tournament at the start of a week and put them in, put them in the drill myself.
Oh no, it's I think it is.
Which
it's
is a lot
so
of work,
hard.
but
yeah.
You sort of get tricks for making it a bit quicker.
Yeah, once you've been around the block a few times.
But yeah, you don't want to have your player. You think that you've got the player that's been around for 5 years, and suddenly your model thinks they're the newbie. It's like that's like you'd see it fairly quickly, but
you could bet first. Do you do any doubles betting?
No, I've never done doubles.
It was just as Misha was asking about doubles, asking Eva too. Cool. What I might do is, Ben, do you want to put Evo's camera and mic back on? I've got a couple of queries here. We've also got a couple that Paul sent through earlier, which are some good ones there, by the way. Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. So, Nick, I'll ask this one to you because, you placed in our last Oz Open Datathon, so I think it's particularly relevant. Do you model differently for the Datathon versus normally when you're just trying to make a profit? You said earlier that variance hits you more, obviously, over a short period than a long one. Do you take that into account in your model?
So for the Datathon, no, I just use my model and I just take whatever numbers. So I just took whatever numbers were there. I'm modelling for a profit, so it'd be nice to get some money in the Datathon, but I'm going to go for the whole year and be profitable. But that said, there are a couple of differences that the Datathon will throw at me. So I guess the first thing I sort of thought about that was, how do you think your model's good enough to beat the beat the odds or beat the market on log loss? And so obviously in round one, if you're not sure, and this is probably what I'll go sort of partway between my prediction from my model and what the odds say. And if you're really not sure, then you can just take the odds.
It's a good bit of advice, guys.
Done.
Take that one on. Harder, obviously, as you go to the ones that aren't there, but at least you can get that.
Yeah. So from round two onwards, you then got the problem. You've got information available, well, which wasn't available when you put in your Datathon submission. So you've got to rely on your ratings and your model then. And so what do you for me, how am I going to look at updating a player's rating? So let's say a $3 shop won in the first round. Obviously their rating is going to go up for round two. So how am I going to try and
account for that,
model that or manage that to give them a better rating in the next round? Now, when I got into the Datathon a couple of years ago, I didn't do anything about it. I just threw it all on as if they hadn't played a game yet. Mm-hmm. And maybe I got a bit lucky, but I've been thinking about that a bit this time.
Any insight?
And then look, I'll throw in some random match scores and see if I can, at least just say for round one, and I'll say, okay, for the underdogs, I'll throw in a random score and see how their model changes and then play them against everybody as if everybody else didn't play. Well, that's just a first off. Mm-hmm. And then I guess the other thing that I was thinking about, the difference between my modelling for and what I'll submit for the Datathon is I model against the market rules, which is my bet's live or, in action after one set.
Yep. But
with the Datathon, a walkover is going to count as well.
So no, we're voiding anything that would be voided. So if it's it's FYI, it's one that we've got a firm ruling on. We had someone come in with a question. So walkovers and things that don't complete the first set will be void. Effectively, it'll be voided. They won't be counted because for exactly that reason, because your bet wouldn't count. So yeah, changes here. Okay. FYI.
Okay, well that's interesting, but it still hasn't stopped me from my other
point.
My other thing that I'm going to do. So when I had a look at when I did my submission last time, I had a look at all the odds and I thought, there's a lot of players here getting 99% chance of winning against whoever other player. And I'm thinking, do I really want that? Because that's a big hit in log loss compared to even a 95%. If that player loses, whereas the gain of 99% log loss for a win versus 95% log loss for a win is that's a tiny number compared to probably was it 0.01 versus 0.05 in log loss if they win, but if they lose it's kind of like -5 versus -3, which is a big hit.
Yeah.
So I just said, okay, well what I'll do is I'll just limit my probability for any match to a certain amount and not let my model get carried away and say it's a 99.9% chance or something.
No, that's a good take on that. No, I appreciate that. I can direct this one at you, Evo. So, you said that you try new strategies, new models. How much time do you spend on generating features out of the data versus your actual model creation? How do you break that balance down?
I think it's definitely a cooperative thing. But in terms of time split, if you have well-structured data, or if you have features at specific points in your data that you care about, those become much easier to process with your models, right? So we spend. I think most of the time has actually been focused on the data. So, and then the models, we adapt them a little bit to fit, like if we change the features of the data, which has happened a few times, then we can change the models accordingly without too much time and pain, but I think we get a lot for it. So I think I spend probably more time on massaging and extracting things out of data and making like you're saying, data, making features out of the data, right? So or data feature engineering it so that we can use those so we can use the data really well with the models. Yeah.
That also, I imagine, speaks to a very methodical and structured approach in how you've created your models, doesn't it? I wonder, in your first couple of years, like you said, before you went more pro, do you think that would have been true then too? When I imagine, I guess I'm suppositions here, but I imagine that you didn't necessarily have as rigorous and structured an approach, and that your models might have been a little bit more deterministically based on the features that were coming in. Do you think that's changed over time, I guess?
Yeah, I think I have a tendency to over-engineer things.
Most devs do. It's not just you.
So sometimes it's actually really burnt me because I end up spending all this time on something that's not important and likely never will be.
There's every dev ever.
Yeah, but fortunately, in terms of the strategies, I think I'm engineering wise, I went a little bit too far, but I think it was worth it because it gives us the flexibility. Yeah. So
it's paying off now.
But there's been adjustments as well. Like nothing is ever adjustment free, right? So there's always things that add on and get tweaked and stuff. But yeah, and adapting to data. There's lots of changes all the time. And I think it's really dependent as well on sort of what we're doing, and if like what we're doing has changed quite dramatically a couple of times. So there has been some big strategy like structure changes. But
I think that's really important to note. Like I've heard that so many times, basically from everyone that I've spoken with, that anyone who does this long term, you have to adapt and change because the markets change, the players change. And I don't mean the players as in the people on the court. I mean the other people playing in the markets, that you're not in a void. And therefore, it's not a static set of data that you're working with. It evolves and therefore you have to evolve. And like you said earlier, if you get too attached, it's not going to work.
Yeah. It can feel quite like a void sometimes. It can feel like it's a very stable thing and things don't change that much, but yeah, they definitely do.
I'm going to ask both you, and happy with either to sort of jump in with an answer. A couple of questions from Wolfgang on your data sources. So specifically or particularly around live data sources. So in terms of things like, last point one, unforced error count. Do you utilize any of that? And if so, you're happy to share maybe where you got it. He's asking particularly about ATP. I know that Tennis Australia is very possessive of their data, protective maybe is a better word, of their data. So it's pretty hard to source, but more generally, do you have any thoughts or advice on that, either of you?
Yeah, I think we're both in the scraping. I mean, Nick mentioned scraping before, and I've definitely gone for scraping before, and it can be a lot of work, and also, yeah, it's also a lot of maintenance. I don't know if you've experienced that, Nick, with maintaining, scraping and then and then everything breaks and falls apart.
Yeah, I'm always tweaking my script for some little change that a website's made, and I've got to, suddenly I get no data out, and I've got to, okay, what did they change this time, and go and add in a little change to my script that scrapes.
Yeah,
that's often the case.
Scraping is it's a bit like trying to automate things with our corporate bookmakers, which I'm sure no one here does. But then obviously you need to be on top of it all the time, otherwise things break.
Yeah, and they do a lot. I think, and I mean, people do sell the data, but it's very high price point. Usually
You'd rather do it yourself.
when you're doing it, if you're looking at buying a feed, it's, in my experience, it's really, unless you're making a stupendous amount, it's a big overhead to pay for that when, so I think scraping is, but there's also caveats there, right? Like you can get burnt a lot from it and they change. And obviously sites don't like being scraped.
Don't make it easy, do
they? So that's a bit of a tricky one, hey, because I don't really want to name a lot of sites.
No, fair enough, and you're very welcome not to. I will ask, Nick, you mentioned earlier a GitHub repo that you'd used. Is that one you'd be happy to share a link to when you were talking about points data that you found someone?
I could put that on the Slack.
If you could, that would be really cool.
It's just a whole lot of data going back for, I don't know, 40 years or something, and they've got points data going back for 10 years or whatever. And I don't know where they get it from. They probably scrape it or get it from some other feed, but that was
That's their problem.
And they're pretty up to date. They can go for a couple of months without updating their data, but I had a look recently and I think it's up to date as of a couple of days ago. So there are a couple of good ones there. One of the good ones obviously is the Deuce package. That one's always good. There's one that came to my attention more recently too. I can't remember the name.
The Jeff Sackman one, I think. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's the one I like. Started off with, but I can't rely on it day to day because he's not updating it when I need it updated.
Yeah, this is a bit out of date there. And he has some other things on there as well. That's really insightful for tennis. I think Jeff Sackman is quite a good resource for that stuff.
Have either of you, when it comes to tennis specifically, got any resources that you'd recommend, blogs, books around modelling tennis that you think would be useful either for a beginner or for someone who's less of a beginner, as in, someone who's trying to get better at their modelling? Or has it been just more generic modelling resources that you've used along the way?
Well, I don't really have much here. I kind of make it up along the way and try and keep my ear to the ground.
A good answer.
Kind of keep my ear to the ground for somebody who's out there shouting that they're a professional and these are the things they like to add, and I go, okay, well, that's interesting. I'll see if that, I'll add that as a parameter and see if it makes any difference. I'm not specifically based it around any reading or blogs or podcasts that I've read along the way.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I haven't really read a lot of books about tennis modeling, but we've tried and keep up sort of our eye on the research. There's quite a bit of interesting papers on like modeling and, a couple of famous ones. But in the end, I think it's quite unknown as well, because those things studies are not related to Betfair or bookings,
wagering often,
right?
Yeah.
Like they sort of have they have to keep separate a lot of the time. So and a lot of the predictive models like that will never beat the booking markets. So
if there are any of those academic papers that you're happy to share links to, there is actually an academic papers channel on Slack, and I know that this community loves that sort of thing and is very keen on reading such things. So if there were any that you've read that you think are particularly valuable, please share some links there, because across the board, this, more than any group I've ever met, is one that's very prepared to actually read the read the papers, not just talk about them, which is always nice.
Okay.
I've got a question here that I'll answer, which is around why we're using log loss. So I have lent a little bit on our data science team for my answer here, because you guys who know me know I'm not a data scientist. I'm passionate about it, but that's not my background. So they've determined the log loss as being the criteria that we're using to the measure, I guess, that we're using for judgment. So as an approach, the reason that we chose it, so classification models, I'm reading here. So a couple of reasons. Classification models, where you pick between binary outcomes like win or loss, are generally less complex to model than regression outcomes like align. So this is when we're deciding, what sort of competition we want to offer, how accessible do we want to make it. For us, the balance there was we didn't want it to be something that you could go and do yourself. So as in, by hand. So Nick going and, choosing the odds that the Betfair markets currently show. We don't want to go too far down that way. We do want there to be some challenge, but we also don't want it to just be pros who can do this. We want it to be, something where it could be your first go at sports modeling. So I love that Ash, who's in my team, he entered the Oz Open Datathon 2019, well before he worked for us, and that was his first go at creating a sports model, and he did place, which I suppose speaks to part of why we hired him. But that's what we wanted here as a competition, something that sat sort of in the middle there. The other part of the answer here is probably even more important. Log loss optimizes or penalizes based on how wrong or right you are, and therefore there's a direct correlation between probabilities and market odds in terms of how successful bettors, it can be based on consistently knowing when the price is off, and therefore it is generally a more fair metric to use if you're then considering maybe betting on your model. Because, as both Nick and Evo said, you want to have a margin against, your predicted odds versus the reality of odds. And therefore, that's part of how you find your edge and therefore capitalize on that edge. Hopefully that's a decent answer for you, and it sort of gives a good sort of reasoning behind that. We're at 27 minutes past, which we did intentionally make this one a bit longer because I thought we'd have some pretty detailed questions, which we did. If you have other questions, both the guys are very kind and happy to answer them in the meetups channel on Slack. So if you're not there, please jump on. And thanks, guys, for taking the time now. But also, this isn't just an hour and a half we're sitting here. I know that there's a lot of thought that goes into, what you want to share and what might be good advice. But also, to answering after, I do very much appreciate, you being so open in what you're prepared to share. Very grateful for that. So thank you very much from me and from the wider community. Thank you guys for joining us, as in guys, community here. This is definitely my favorite part of my job, is being able to, be involved in what you guys are doing and try and grow and develop and nurture this community. If you don't already know me and Ben and Ash and our team, and you think that we could help you, please reach out. I'll get one of the guys to, Ash, maybe if you can share our automation@betfair.com.au email address. We're nice guys. I like to think we're nice guys. And we're always happy to help with data, with automation support, with API access. Please, we can't help if we don't know you're there. So reach out. You hopefully noticed I'm always up for a chat. Please let us know if we can help along the way. We're always here. We're about to end our recorded session, and we will, for anyone who wants to, completely open, we'll jump to an unrecorded Zoom chat separately for anyone who wants to jump in and have what we call a pub session. Someday we'll be able to do this in person again, and I'll shout you all a beer. But until then, we got to do it online. So Ben's just put in there an invitation. There's a random passcode there that you can see. Make sure you copy that now before we close the session. But grab that, copy that across for anyone who wants to join. Obviously, welcome to or not to. But finally, thank you all very much for our first meetup of the year. In Feb, we won't have a meetup, but we will be hosting pub session, so we can just have a bit of a chat. We'll set a date out for that soon. Then in March, we'll be back with another meetup like normal. If you've got any wishes for guests, please send through. I'd love to hear. Otherwise, I'm lucky. I know some interesting people, so I'm sure I can find some. But let me know if there's anyone you'd like to hear from. Thank you again, Evo. Thank you, Nick. I owe you both a drink in person when we're allowed to. And thank you for a lovely evening. And I will see some of you in the other Zoom session in a minute. So thank you all very much, and good night.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.